In the trembling quiet of a storm-lashed night, Eleanor Grayson knelt before her altar, whispering the same prayer she had spoken every night for 9 years. The candle before her wavered, its blue flame defying the wind that leaked through cracked windows. She prayed for her lost son's return, not as a plea, but as the last echo of faith clinging to life. Then came the knock. Soft, deliberate, human. Her breath hitched. Another knock, closer this time. She rose, heart hammering in her chest, clutching the cross at her throat as the storm howled beyond the door. When she opened it, lightning split the sky. And there he stood, a young man, drenched and trembling, eyes full of recognition. "Mom," he whispered. Behind her the candle burned higher, and somewhere, the photo on her altar seemed to glow with light. The cottage was filled with rain, scent, and disbelief. Eleanor stared at the stranger wrapped in her late husband's coat, seated by the fire she hastily lit. His eyes, gray and deep, mirrored her son's, yet behind them was something foreign, like an echo from another life. He spoke softly, recalling places only her son had known. The beach where he built driftwood castles, the lullaby she used to hum when storms frightened him. But when she asked what toy he carried on the day he vanished, his lips faltered. The silence stretched, brittle and cold. "I don't remember," he murmured, looking into the flames. Eleanor's tears fell quietly, neither faith nor reason able to name the thing before her. Morning came pale and cold, seeping through the curtains like a confession. Eleanor moved quietly, her every glance a study of the man who now occupied her son's chair. When he smiled, it was familiar, almost perfect. She handed him an old photo album, her voice trembling. "Tell me who they are." He turned the pages carefully, naming each face with uncanny accuracy until one picture stopped him. Her son's 9th birthday. He hesitated, eyes flickering. And for a breath, something ancient shimmered behind his expression. "That's me," he whispered. But the word hung heavy, unsure. Eleanor's heartbeat echoed in her ears as the clock struck 9. The hour her son had disappeared all those years ago. By evening, word of the miracle had spread. Father Alden arrived, his expression heavy beneath his faith's calm mask. He studied the young man's face, then Eleanor's trembling hands. "Miracles," he said softly, "do not always come from heaven." The words hung like incense in the room, thick and suffocating. Gabriel smiled politely, yet the priest's eyes never left his. Eleanor clutched her cross tighter, her knuckles pale as stone. The priest leaned closer, whispering to her alone. "Be careful what answers your prayers." She turned toward the fire. It hissed, though no one had touched it. That night, the cottage whispered. Eleanor awoke to faint laughter. A child's laughter, slipping through the cracks of her old walls. She followed it barefoot down the hallway, the air cold enough to sting her breath. The sound came from her son's old room, untouched since he vanished. She opened the door to find Gabriel sitting at the window, murmuring to himself. "He talks to me," he said without turning. "The boy you lost, he remembers." Her heart stopped. The candle she held flickered violently, the flame bending toward him as if drawn to his voice. For the first time, she wasn't sure whether she was hearing a miracle or a warning. The cottage was quieter than it had been in years. Eleanor set 2 plates across from each other, her hands shaking as she placed the fork, just so, as she once had when her boy was small. Gabriel sat across from her, his smile soft but hollow, watching her as though relearning a dream. The ticking clock filled the space between them like a pulse neither could own. He complimented her cooking, recalling the same meal from childhood, word for word, detail for detail. But when she laughed and asked what toy he hid under the table that day, His eyes drifted down, his expression dimming into distance. For a moment, the air shifted. The candlelight bent toward him again, just like before. She whispered a prayer under her breath, not for faith, but for truth. By morning, the small coastal town buzzed with whispers of resurrection. Neighbors arrived bearing tears and disbelief, blessing themselves before daring to look at the boy they'd buried in memory. Gabriel smiled shyly, shaking hands, answering questions that blurred the line between truth and invention. Eleanor watched from her porch, her faith and fear knotted tight in her chest. Father Alden's warning still echoed in her mind, yet she couldn't stop the warmth rising in her. The dangerous comfort of hope reborn. When the crowd left, she turned to see Gabriel standing by the gate, his head bowed, lips moving soundlessly. The ocean wind caught his whisper, a prayer in a language she had never heard. Later that night, as Gabriel slept on the couch, Eleanor drew the blanket higher over his shoulders. Her eyes caught the faint outline of a scar trailing down his collarbone, a mark her son never had. She froze, her breath caught halfway between faith and dread. Her mind reached for reason. Maybe a childhood injury forgotten, a trick of light, a miracle's imperfection. Yet the scar pulsed faintly, as though alive under his skin. She reached out, but before her fingers could touch, his hand shot up, catching hers in the dark. His eyes opened slowly, pupils wide and black. "You prayed for me," he whispered. "You made me." Eleanor's voice broke into the silence. "Who are you?" The following evening, Eleanor awoke to the sound of whispers rising from beneath the floorboards, soft, rhythmic, like prayer. She crept down the hallway, her candle trembling in her grip. The sound led to the living room where Gabriel sat cross-legged on the floor, eyes closed, murmuring in that same foreign tongue. The flame in her candle stretched toward him, the air pulsing with invisible warmth. His voice deepened, splitting into two tones, one young and trembling, the other low, ancient, almost inhuman. The rosary slipped from her hand. "Gabriel," she whispered, but he did not look up. Instead, he smiled faintly, and in her son's voice said, "It's safe now, Mom. He's listening." At dawn, Eleanor found Gabriel standing barefoot on the shoreline behind the house, waves lapping at his feet. The sea mirrored the faint light of morning, but his reflection was wrong. It moved a heartbeat slower, eyes glowing faintly in the gray surf. He turned toward her, smiling gently, and asked if she remembered teaching him to float. She did. But that boy had been afraid of the ocean. The wind carried the salt scent of memory, and for an instant she saw a child's silhouette beside him, hand in hand with his own. Then the reflection blinked, though Gabriel hadn't. Her breath hitched. The sea whispered something low, something that sounded disturbingly like her name. Night fell heavy and strange. Eleanor sat in her chair, staring into the darkened stairwell when she heard it again. That soft, innocent laughter. It floated down from her son's old room, light as dust and just as real. Her breath caught. She rose, each step up the staircase creaking beneath her weight. The laughter came again, closer this time, echoing like it was trapped in the walls. When she reached the door, it was slightly ajar, glowing faintly with candlelight from within. Gabriel stood by the bed, whispering softly to the air. "He missed you too," he said without turning. Her knees weakened. The wind outside wailed, but the sound inside the room, that laughter, didn't stop. It was happy, familiar, and it wasn't hers anymore. Father Alden came at dawn, his face lined deeper, his eyes ringed with sleeplessness. "He's not what you think," he said, gripping Eleanor's hands tight enough to hurt. She resisted his fear with trembling defiance. "Then tell me what he is," she demanded. The priest glanced toward the house, voice barely a whisper. Something answered you, Eleanor. Not God, not the boy. His warning tasted of salt and ash. Inside, Gabriel watched them from the window. Head tilted slightly, smiling faintly. His reflection in the glass blinked a second too late, as if something else inside him were still catching up. That evening, Eleanor tried to pray. Kneeling at her altar, she spoke the familiar words, but the candle flickered violently, guttering blue. The air turned thick, as if the house itself were holding its breath. Her voice cracked, faltered. And from behind her, another voice began repeating her prayer. Gabriel stood in the doorway, whispering in perfect unison with her, his tone calm, almost tender. But when she stopped, he didn't. His voice deepened, echoing beneath the floorboards, spilling into the walls. She turned to look, and for an instant, there were two shadows where he stood, one of him and one of something taller, darker, closer. The house groaned as rain battered the windows. Eleanor wiped the fog from the bathroom mirror and froze. Behind her reflection stood Gabriel, silent, unmoving. She turned, but he was gone. The mirror, though, still showed him standing there. Slowly, his hand reached forward, inside the reflection, pressing against the glass from the other side. Her breath clouded the surface as she whispered his name. The reflection smiled, even as the real Gabriel stepped quietly into the doorway behind her. "Mom," he said softly. "Why are you crying?" The mirror's smile didn't fade. That night, Eleanor couldn't sleep. Somewhere between her dreams and waking, a melody drifted through the house, the lullaby she once sang to her son. She followed the sound to the living room, heart thudding like a drum. There, Gabriel sat at the piano, fingers moving gently across the keys. She hadn't touched that piano in years. The last time she did, she was singing to a boy who never came home. "Do you remember this?" he asked without looking up. The room filled with the haunting tune, but beneath it came another note. Low, wrong, resonating from the floorboards themselves. The house seemed to hum with it, as if joining the song. Eleanor pressed her hand to her chest and whispered, "Please, stop." But the music didn't obey. The day was gray when Detective Mara Vale arrived, sharp-eyed, steady, and too skeptical for miracles. She introduced herself politely, but carried the quiet weight of disbelief. Eleanor served her tea with shaking hands, aware of Gabriel's watchful silence from across the room. "They say your son returned," Mara began, her tone neither accusing nor gentle. "Can I see him?" Eleanor nodded, her heart trembling. Gabriel stepped forward, smiling as though welcoming an old friend. Mara's eyes narrowed, not in fear, but in recognition. "I've seen you before," she whispered. "But that's not possible." The air shifted. Gabriel tilted his head. "Maybe you prayed too," he said. Back at the precinct, Mara spread a series of yellow documents across her desk. Missing persons reports, death certificates, medical records. Each paper whispered the same impossible truth. Gabriel's name had appeared before, attached to different faces across decades. Same age, same features, vanishing after each appearance. She stared at the photographs until the room felt smaller. The pattern was too deliberate to be chance. Her partner asked who she was chasing. "Not who," she murmured, tracing the names with her fingertip. "What?" She glanced toward the candle flickering beside her. She hadn't lit it. That night, Mara drove to the old cemetery by the cliffs, flashlight trembling in her grip. The wind howled through the tombstones, carrying the scent of salt and decay. Eleanor's son's grave lay there. She'd checked the records herself, but as the beam of light swept across the headstone, her heart stopped. The earth had been turned. Fresh soil, recently disturbed. Her breath quickened as she knelt, brushing aside wet dirt to find the coffin cracked open. Inside, there was no body, only a child's shoe, half-rotted, resting atop a folded scrap of paper that read in faded ink, "Thank you for calling me home." When Mara returned to the church, she found Father Alden waiting in the dark. His hands shook as he poured whiskey into a glass, his voice thick with guilt. "He was part of something older than us," he confessed. "A ritual meant to summon faith into flesh. Your mother's prayers, her grief, they opened a door. But the thing that came through, it learned to wear faces." Mara felt the air around them tighten. The priest's eyes glistened with fear. Every few decades it returns to the one who called it. Each time it learns more. This time it came back as her son. His words broke into silence, and somewhere above them, the church bell began to toll. Though no one was there to ring it, Eleanor sat before her altar again. The same candle burning lower each night. Her hands shook as she whispered the prayer that had once brought her son back. This time, her voice was a confession. "If you're not him," she murmured, "then take me instead." Gabriel stood behind her, his reflection flickering in the glass of the photo frame. "You gave me life," he said softly, stepping closer. "And now I can give you peace." She turned, tears streaking down her cheeks as the candle's flames split in two. One burning gold, the other black. The air hummed. The floorboards beneath her feet pulsed with a heartbeat, not her own. The house was silent, except for Gabriel's voice reciting a prayer. Eleanor had never taught him. He sat before her altar, whispering in a tone both sacred and strange, his shadow stretching across the walls like smoke. "Where did you learn that?" she asked. His smile faltered. "It was already here," he said, tapping his chest. "I remember your prayers, every word you spoke into the dark. You called to something and I came." Eleanor's knees weakened as his tone deepened. "But you're not my son." He looked up at her, eyes shining with sorrow and light. "You made me your son." "And that's what I became." Eleanor led Gabriel to her son's room, now dusted with age and sorrow. She opened a drawer and pulled out a photograph of the boy, smiling, wild-haired, his eyes bright with life. "Tell me his name," she whispered. Gabriel stared at the picture, fingers trembling. For a moment, something human flickered within him. "I know him," he said. "He dreams of the sea." Her tears fell onto the photo. "He died near the sea," she replied. Gabriel looked up, his voice cracking. "No, Eleanor. He's still dreaming. I hear him every night, through me." The candlelight dimmed as though listening. That night, the storm returned. Lightning carved the sky as Eleanor watched Gabriel standing in the yard, rain pouring down his face. His skin shimmered faintly, veins glowing like threads of gold beneath his flesh. "What are you?" she shouted through the thunder. He turned to her, voice breaking. "Your prayer, given form, the part of faith that refused to die." His body glowed brighter, the rain hissing into steam upon contact. "But something else came through with me," he whispered. "Something that wears light as a mask." Eleanor's heart pounded. Behind him, the sky flashed again, and for an instant, two shadows stood where only one man should be. Father Alden arrived drenched, Bible clutched to his chest, face white as marble. "He is not the boy," he warned, voice trembling. "He's what your grief summoned, the echo of a soul that never was." Eleanor blocked his path, tears streaming down her face. "Then why does he remember everything?" The priest's voice broke. "Because you gave it to him. Faith feeds creation." Gabriel stood behind them, calm, radiant. "You think I'm evil," he said softly, "but all I wanted was to exist." The priest raised his hand to bless him, and the candlelight flared, shattering the glass frames around the altar. The storm reached its peak, as Gabriel stepped closer, the air glowing around him. "I wasn't born," he whispered. "I was made from love that refused to let go." Eleanor reached out, trembling, her palm against his chest. Beneath her touch, she felt a heartbeat. Slow, warm, impossibly real. "Then you're my son," she breathed. "No," he said gently, his eyes bright with sorrow. "I'm what your son became when you wouldn't stop calling him." The light around him pulsed, soft and beautiful, wrapping her in warmth that felt like both mercy and punishment. "Forgive me," he said. And then the light went out. The night split open with thunder. The sea rose against the cliffs, hurling spray against the windows of Eleanor's cottage. Inside, the walls shuddered as if alive. Gabriel stood before the altar, whispering in the language that was not meant for human tongues. Eleanor held the cross tight, her knuckles white, whispering her own prayer beneath his chant. Father Alden arrived breathless, drenched, clutching his Bible and holy oil. "It's begun," he gasped. "Once the voice takes flesh, it must be sent back." Gabriel turned slowly, eyes glowing with stormlight. "You can't send back what was invited," he said, his voice echoing in layers. The wind outside screamed like something alive. The priest's voice boomed through the storm, Latin rolling off his tongue like thunder. Gabriel laughed softly, almost kindly. "You think I'm a demon?" he whispered. "I was born of her love." Eleanor trembled, torn between them, the cross shaking in her hand. The air thickened, vibrating with unseen power. The candles flared white, their flames stretching toward the ceiling. Father Alden shouted louder, forcing the holy words through the gale. Gabriel's laughter broke into a sob. "You don't understand," he cried. "I never wanted to stay." The walls groaned, paint cracking. A roar building deep beneath the floor. Eleanor screamed, not in fear but in heartbreak. Eleanor crawled toward Gabriel, her hair plastered to her face, the air shimmering with electric heat. "Look at me," she begged. His eyes turned to her. "Two suns dimming behind clouds of grief. I remember everything you prayed for," he said softly. "Every night, every tear. That's what made me." His voice cracked. "But you didn't ask who was listening." Lightning exploded across the walls, illuminating the photo of her real son. The frame split, the image within rippling like water. Eleanor's heart shattered as she whispered, "Then who are you?" Gabriel's answer was almost gentle. "The echo of your faith, and the shadow that came with it." The storm reached its peak as Father Alden shouted the final rite, his voice breaking. Gabriel fell to his knees, light pouring from his mouth and eyes, filling the room with a blinding radiance. Eleanor shielded her face, crying his name. "You can't save me," Gabriel whispered, his form flickering like a dying flame. "I was never meant to stay." The light grew unbearable. The walls vanished, replaced by swirling clouds of gold and shadow. Eleanor reached through the brightness, her hand finding his. "Then take me with you," she pleaded. He smiled one last time, the light inside him softening. "You already did." When the light faded, the storm was gone. The air hung still and fragile. Father Alden stood alone in the ruins of the cottage, rain leaking through the broken roof. Eleanor knelt on the floor, clutching Gabriel's shirt. Empty, weightless, the fabric still warm. The priest whispered a prayer, his voice trembling. But no words came. A faint glow lingered where Gabriel had been, swirling upward like dust catching dawn. Eleanor lifted her eyes toward it, whispering. He wasn't mine to lose. The glow faded into the ceiling's cracks. Outside, the sea was calm again, its waves sighing against the shore like a benediction. Morning arrived like a confession. The cottage, broken and half buried in silence, seemed to breathe with the ocean wind. Eleanor wandered through the wreckage barefoot, her steps soft over the scattered glass. The air was thick with the scent of rain and candle wax. She found the altar overturned, the candle still smoking. The photograph of her son face down among the ashes. When she lifted it, the glass fell away, and behind the picture lay a folded note in a child's handwriting. Her throat closed as she unfolded it. "Thank you for believing." The ink shimmered faintly, like salt water catching sunlight. For the first time in years, she didn't cry. Detective Mara Vale returned days later, her face pale from sleepless nights. The report she carried was thin, almost meaningless. No signs of life, no explanation for the light seen from miles away. She found Eleanor sitting by the broken window staring at the sea. "He's gone," Mara said gently. Eleanor nodded. "He was never meant to stay." The detective hesitated, then handed her a small silver chain, the cross that had been found in the debris. "It's yours." Eleanor took it, the metal warm against her palm, and looked out at the horizon. "It always was," she whispered. That evening, Eleanor walked down to the beach where the waves first carried her son away. The tide was low, the sand cold beneath her feet. She knelt, pressing her hand into the wet earth as though it might pulse with memory. "I wanted you back," she said softly to the horizon. "But I never asked what it would cost." The sea replied in whispers, the foam curling around her knees like an embrace. She closed her eyes, tears mixing with salt water. For a moment she swore she felt a small hand slip into hers, warm, gentle, and impossibly real. When she opened her eyes, only the wind remained. That night, the church bell began to ring. Father Alden, still haunted but alive, climbed the stairs to stop it. But when he reached the tower, the rope hung untouched. The bell swung on its own, slow and mournful. Outside, Eleanor watched from her porch, her shawl tight against the wind. Each toll echoed across the town, 12 chimes, and then one more, softer, almost tender. She closed her eyes as the final sound faded. Somewhere between faith and silence, she understood. It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a farewell. When morning came, the sea was still. Eleanor sat on her porch, wrapped in the quiet hum of life returning. The world smelled of salt and renewal. A child's laughter echoed faintly across the cliffs. Only once. Only enough to remind her that some prayers don't end. They just change shape. She smiled, pressing the note from the altar against her heart. The horizon glowed with a rising sun, and in its light, the ocean shimmered with golden ripples, as if someone beneath the waves was waving goodbye. "Rest now," she whispered. "We're both free," and for the first time in 9 years, the candle inside her house finally went out.